So it's 8:15, January 28th, and I'd like to call the Whatcom PUD number 1 meeting to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hope I didn't trip anybody up with the way I recited. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. So we have a pretty straightforward agenda today. Of course, all our traditional old business and a couple of new business items. Is there, and of course, in the executive session, we're doing a performance review. Is there any changes to the agenda?
We're reporting to me.
Nope.
Sure.
Okay, so then I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think I heard Eddie there too.
Aye, yeah, we all did.
Okay, so moving on. Let's look at the consent agenda, the meetings minutes of the last meeting, as well as the claims of January 28th. Any comments on those? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And so let's move on. We have a public comment period at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. This is the first one. So if you're in the room, please come to the mic if you're wanting to make a comment. And if you're online, please raise your hand. Let's first take comment from people in the room. Is there anybody in the room who'd like to make a comment?
Yes.
Please proceed, because that sounds like Todd.
That is Todd. Thank you, Commissioner Dishmani. My name is Todd Lagerstein. I'm here as a private citizen, and I just wanted to thank this commission for continuing to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I was at the Charter Review Commission last night, and there was a consideration to not do the Pledge of Allegiance. And I think it's really important in this day and age that patriotism not be consigned or owned by any one group. And I think it's also important to remind people that this is a republic indivisible with liberty and justice for all. So I want to thank this commission for continuing to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Any more comments in the room? And then let's check online. Can someone help with that?
I don't see any hands raised. Oh,
There we go.
there's one.
That was not me, sorry.
Okay, is there any further potential public comment online? Okay, well then let's close the public comment period. There will be a, just gonna check myself real quick. There will be another public comment at the end of the meeting.
Well, just so you know, I'm sending out an invite for a Zoom link for the executive session for you to join. At the end
Oh,
of the
thank
meeting.
you.
So you'll have to keep an eye out for that at the end of the meeting.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Let's move on to the general manager's report.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got a number of things to talk about. Fortunately, they're all relatively quick. Two with the county. The first, the county transitioned their accounting system, and they did that around the first of the year. and normally when you go from one big system to another, there's some data lost in translation. In this case, they failed to translate over our vendor list. Now that in and of itself is a problem because we do pay a lot of bills every month, but, counted among our vendors was our entire employee population save for 3. And, that employee population includes our commissioners. So, we don't believe that we're gonna have any trouble getting you guys checks this month, but we may. You guys were, in fact, Jamie and Atul were excluded as vendors. I was excluded as a vendor. I'm not sure who all else, but we're working with the county to get that fixed. They wanted us yesterday to recreate all the vendor profiles in their new system. And that is appropriately pushed back and said, you have all that information archived. It should have translated over when you did your transition, and it did not. They need to go back and rerun that. And, so anyway, she's going through that. They never even checked to see who had been issued a check in the last 24 months, which is standard in these transitions. Never happened. And that would have immediately told them to include everybody, and it would have been not a problem. Second thing with regard to the county is the elections. We had budgeted 180,000 for our share of the elections. The total cost was a little over 700,000. The bill was over 200,000. So we paid, the low commission here paid for roughly 1/3 of the entire election cost. It's a problem. So I will just let you know that this was brought up years ago apparently and not resolved or resolved not in our favor. Just to let you know, I'll be pursuing that. I think that's just an outrageous amount of money to charge us for the very small role we had in the election. And no offense to anybody here. It was we had 2 candidates, 2 positions to be filled out of 15 or 20. And they had all the other ballot measures, and I mean, it's absurd for us to carry that amount of weight.
I wasn't aware of that, yeah. You said 200,000?
Yeah, over 200. I don't remember the exact number,
How
like 208 or something. It was a lot.
Essentially just to pay for printing ballots and mailing and the whole, just the operation.
I think what they did was they calculated the total amount, and then they looked at the number of organizations, or John, maybe you can walk
It's
through the
been years since
allocation.
I've looked at this, but it is, who has, in the off years, it's always worse in the off years from a county and city council elections. And they look at the number of positions, the size of the entities, and then have a methodology of breaking it out. I remember vaguely 15 years ago, I think Beauty and the Port had an issue with how the county was allocating costs of the election. I think it was ended up deciding not to pursue an argument, but there's different interpretations of the statute, and the county ends up with the most adverse to the county-wide districts. And that's off recollection, you know.
I guess I could see how that would end up being, because I recall the county's voter information pamphlet separate from the state's only included the PUD and the Charter Review Commission. There's other counties I think send theirs as a combined, right, with the
I'm not sure.
local and state, but there were so few local offices in this election year somehow
That does affect it.
Yeah.
So we're requesting information from the other PUDs through our PUD association.
Oh.
And we believe that there's different levels of, or different interpretations statewide. And so that's where we're starting is, you know, just what's being done in the rest of the state, and then we'll go back on that. I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody.
No, I think that's an excellent idea to use other PUDs as a benchmark. Makes a lot of sense.
So then, some really quick items. Every other year, every third year, the Teamsters audits us for various things. You know, did we correctly allocate dues and things like that? And just to let you know that that's ongoing, and that is working through that. This Friday, we're having a meeting on our bond rating, so we'll find out what the bond rating is, and then it'll be public, and I can share with everybody. And I'm not sure where that's going to go. I feel good about it, but You know, that was my perception, not the bond rating agency's perception, so. The fact that we felt good about it doesn't actually mean much, but I felt good about it. The strategic plan, we're in the final stages of preparing the contract. We've got a formal statement of work back to Mal Foster Olanji, and they've got some, they're doing some editing now, and they're gonna send that back, and I suspect it'll be acceptable, and then we'll have a signed contract and we'll be able to start on that. And then last but not least, I understand that everybody has talked to Karina Boyer, and okay, so she's got some ideas about next steps around team building, and we're looking at Friday, March 14th in the afternoon for a meeting. And we're gonna try and hold it off-site. I'll try again for the Blaine facility, see if that works out. Anyway, that's about it. So, any other questions of me?
Not for now.
Okay, that's the end of my report. I'd like to know-
Except that, you know, I was perfectly happy to meet in Blaine's. Maybe we want to pick another location too.
All right, do you have a suggestion?
No,
All right.
but yeah, you pursue that, and I'll get back to you in a few days for any suggestions of other locations.
Okay, and as a reminder, we've had meetings obviously in Ferndale, we've had them in Bellingham, we've had them in Blaine, and we've had them in Linden. The reason that I'm going back to Blaine is because, number one, they're really easy to work with and get the room and all that. So was Linden. It was without cost to us, which was nice. And it was plenty big enough so that if a whole bunch of people decided they wanted to attend, we could accommodate it.
And I really liked the room. It was a good room that we were using, yeah. Lots of room in the room.
Well, that's it for me. I'd like to turn it over to Kurt.
Morning, commissioners. Can you see my screen there? Oh, wait, how about now?
Yep.
Yep, okay. So this is the turbidity vault that we've been working on here at Plant 2. We have a 11-foot square footing, and on top of that will be placed the precast portions of the vault. We had to do the footing and pour in place for the base. That pipe that's leaving Plant 2. It's a 24-inch line. So it's pretty large pour. It's maybe not too easy to see the scale there, but that's the basin wall in the background of this picture here, and then the 24-inch line leaving. And so this pipe will actually head over to the high head building where it'll be pumped out to the customers. So just wanted to show all of you the where this was poured. I believe it was Tuesday of last week. So they're letting it set for a week, and then they're gonna move on to the next steps after they strip the forms. We had to put a couple of shoring up braces below to hold it up, so it's not just floating out there in space. But that's just kind of a little update of our turbidity vault out there. Is there any questions?
Any questions?
Not for me.
I have. Go ahead. Okay, I have a question. I was curious, what was the reason why we poured the footing before removing the pipe?
Well, we're not moving the pipe at all. The pipe is staying there the whole time, and so there wasn't any way to do a precast concrete footing that could kind of get underneath there, all in one piece. So they poured in place the concrete there, and then the walls of the vault can be precast and set separately.
And then that pipe will be cut.
No, the pipe will not. No, we'll put I think it would be a mag meter on the outside of it, and that'll tell us we won't be cutting into it at all.
Oh, okay. So it'll be inside the vault.
Correct.
I'm just curious about a pipe running through the vault. What's the function there?
It gives us the turbidity of leaving our basins. So that way we can know, because right now we don't have an exact meter at that point. So we know, we have some meters coming in, but we know if we know exactly what's leaving, then we can adjust our use of our polyaluminum chloride better, so we can use it more judiciously.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, right now we're using a lagging indicator to dose, right?
Yeah.
So it's good to have both, and now we'll have both a leading and a lagging indicator,
Yes.
which will be better controls. And
Right.
hopefully,
We'll have a better idea.
and better economic utilization of our chemicals.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Any further questions on the operations? And
Oh.
if there's any other questions on the general manager's report, or we can move on?
No,
Oh, I guess it doesn't hurt to ask, any concerns about the river conditions?
Well, there's the potential change in the weather. Right now, I mean, the river levels are fine. It's a very, very clean river right now. But as you may be aware, this weekend we're going to start seeing a change in potential snow, and then we don't really know what's going to be at the back end of the snow, if we're going to get any Fraser outflow or not. That's a little too far out. Right now, the river temp this morning was 36 degrees, so we're getting close. I mean, if we did have a change in the weather with some wind and a drop by a few more degrees, we could start getting worried even more.
Okay, and in the email, general manager put out, Chris, you put out an email about snowpack and mountain conditions are pretty good. 80%, I think you said, of average.
I think from what I've looked, we're at 90 to 100%. I think there's three locations up in the Mount Baker area that I look at that we're at 90 to 100% currently.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, let's move on. So the next item on the agenda is old business. So we start with the broadband update.
Andrew, would you like to say a couple words?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. As you know, we're working fast and furious on the deed applications, which are due at the end of this week. Working really well with our Port of Bellingham friends, so well together that between the teams working together, you probably wouldn't be able to decipher them between their organizations, because we probably just look like one working together. So Tyler and his team have been absolutely wonderful. They'll be the lead applicant, as we talked about in the last meeting. And we're gearing up to submit on 7 project areas out of the 11 by the end of this week. So that's taking up most of my time. So that's the broadband update. Let me know if there's any questions.
Thanks, Andrew.
Any questions from the commission? I have one. Go ahead. Yeah, as a chair, I usually prefer that everybody else speak first.
May I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so, okay, you're turning this in by Friday, like end of the week, right?
Yeah.
And then are we, I guess the application material is gonna be shared with us in full at that point? Or,
Gosh, if you want it. I mean, it's probably 80 pages for each area.
I'm just curious to,
We can forward it to you electronically, if you want it. You can have it.
okay, yeah, I'm just curious to look at the project, or see what we're proposing more and more. And that's just something that I'm trying to get a better bearing on and learning about, so. But that's awesome, and I know you've been doing a ton of work on that for a long time, and glad that, we're almost through this step. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
Oh, sorry.
yeah, we'll just hope that there's actually funding at the end of the,
Mhm.
and not just because the applications, right?
So, maybe in response to your comment, Eddie, it might be a good idea for Andrew after he catches up on sleep and other things, like walking your dog or whatever you need to do to catch up, writing a brief summary on the applications we did. If that would be helpful, that might be a good, after the fact, report out on the BEAD application that we can refer back to. And then, of course, we'll be in a waiting game. That could be between months to a year. Maybe not quite a year, but many, many months. Right? Is that correct, Andrew, Chris? We have a long waiting period, right, of back and forths on the applications.
So it's a long full evaluation period. We've been told by the broadband office that the successful candidates will be notified verbally. I think in their terms, it was relatively quickly,
Yes.
but they wouldn't commit to anything. So I'm not sure what that means exactly. What the broadband office has to do is they have to go through the first round, the second round, the third round, whatever it takes to have an offer for every broadband service location or BSL in the entire state. The National Telecommunication, NTIA, whatever that stands for, I don't know that acronym. NTIA wants to see every BSL served in every state before they fully accept their state's plan. After the NTIA has fully reviewed everything, then they give the official okey-doke to WSBO, a Washington State Broadband Office, and WSBO turns around then and gives formal notification to the applicants. So the whole process could take, I don't know how long, a year or more. If we're successful, we might hear quicker than that. There's just no way to know. And we could be notified that we're successful for a particular area, and for some reason that we can't foresee today, NTIA turns around and rejects it. I mean, we just don't know. That's not our call. And so until we get the official okey-doke back from WSBO at the end of the NTIA review round, then we'll know. Hope that didn't muddy the waters.
No, just to be clear, the first victory is a hollow victory. Right? It's it doesn't have any commitments attached to it. So it's a good notion. It's good notional information, but it's not a real
I would say it's unlikely that NTIA would overturn WSBO's recommendation. They'd have to have a pretty good reason for it.
okay.
So I think it's not a hollow victory. It would be good news. I just don't have any idea clearly when that would happen. Andrew, did I mischaracterize that whole thing?
No, I think that's on point, absolutely. I mean, just to kind of take on a little bit more information is, the broadband office will have to submit the statewide plan, which will include each county's and all the project areas within those counties, all that submitted up to NTIA, by May 2nd, I believe. So round 2 will happen in February to state, because there'll be a 60-day period for round 2. So WSBO, Washington State Broadband Office, excuse me, they are in a fast track to get through these round 1, round 2, and round 3, which goes back to the reason why they were accepting an all fiber and the wireless hybrid all in round 1, because round 2 is supposed to be hybrid. So that's, Chris is right, but then NTIA needs to review, so it could be up to a year before we get to contract.
And as a reminder, last time we went through the time, it took almost a year once we got awarded to get the contract through WSBO. So I don't expect that this time. If that's the case, we're running up against the end of the original legislation that authorized the funds. So I think that would be problematic. So I think everybody's in a big hurry to get this done above us. And that's kind of a nice thing.
So the last thing I wanted to raise is that I reached out to the South Fork Community Association, South Fork Valley Community Association, and just to let them know that we were not going to be including them in our BEAD applications. And that gave them a rough summary of what the reasons were. I asked Andrew and Chris to be able to address them if they come and give public comment today. Did you guys, Chris, Andrew, have any communications with anybody from that association or from the South Fork Valley?
I did not. No. Andrew did not.
Okay, so I'll just summarize this. Obviously, they wanted us to apply. It's just to summarize, and Chris and Andrew, please help me here. The reason that we didn't apply is because basically we would have a very uncompetitive offer in that area if we applied. And the reason is because the price per pass would be exorbitantly large. And the reason the price per pass would be exorbitantly large because so many of the addresses are already under the USDA Rural Connect funding allocation, and that leaves the remaining areas to be sparsely located, and again, very hard to serve affordably. Is that a correct summary? Please correct me, guys.
Commissioner, just to kind of categorize just to reiterate, I guess, kind of the larger concept is just that even though the PUD is not going after a specific project area, it doesn't mean it's not going to be part and included within the larger BEAD portfolio, if you will. So what I mean by that is if nobody applies for that area in round 1, and again in round 2, the state broadband office during round 3 will directly negotiate with the nearest or the few ISPs that are in that area to find a solution to serve those customers that are currently unserved. So under the BEAD umbrella, they will still be required to be served through some technology that will bring them up to the definition of served under the program, to Chris's earlier point. It sounds like the area that you're talking about with this community association, and I haven't looked directly at the address points specifically, may be within an already funded area, which would be the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. And if that's the case, nobody can apply for those dollars because there's already an existing commitment, which is the federal funding that has already happened prior to BEAD. So they would be off the map, so to speak. They might not be served today, but there's an existing commitment, meaning Ziply, who won that RDOF area, will be required to serve those areas. But if they're outside that RDOF area, then again, and within that project area, which I believe is project area 192, then they will have some sort of technology that will serve them under BEAD, because the state cannot submit even our applications up to NTIA until they have all of the projects and everyone who's unserved in our community with some sort of technology in their application that goes up to NTIA. And then beyond that, a reason why then the PUD, bringing us to your more direct question, is yes, because if we said to the providers in the community, if you want to partner with the PUD, let us know. And today there's been no provider that is interested in working directly with the PUD for that specific project area.
Without an ISP, yeah, right. Thank you. I mean, so I think you gave an excellent explanation. You covered many aspects. You know, the private sector partner, the overlap of funding areas. And again, the reason I in particular followed up on this area is because staff know that both Commissioner Grant and I over the years tried quite consistently to address this issue of the slowness of build out under RDOF. And I just remind you again, when I first visited this subject in communications with the ISP in that region, Ziply, the commitment I was given was that design would be completed by the end of 2023. And construction would begin in by the end of 2022. I misspoke, I'm sorry. And construction would begin in 2023. And of course, there's still very little in the way of build out, although there is some build out happening. And I just, it's not within the scope, and that's just the way it is. So we're gonna do what we can, right, guys?
All the time.
Okay, so moving on from the broadband report. Anything else, by the way, before we move on? Okay, let's move on.
Yeah,
Go ahead, John.
adjudication update.
Yeah.
Before I jump in, Commissioner, just so you know, I've been going back and forth with Mike Maycomer to arrange for an alternate host on the Zoom link because I'm not attending as that's the GM review. And so we're sorting out how to have that link done in the background here. So we may, when we're done with the regular part, I may need a little bit of time to coordinate with Mike to get that set up. So adjudication update, we had a hearing in December that approved the summons with minor revisions by the court. Ecology had indicated that they anticipated mailing and service in March. We think it would be more likely to be late March at this point due to ownership updates, printing, funding limitations, travel limitations imposed on state government. Ecology last week filed a motion to amend the service list, an updated list of claimants. You know, they're trying to reconcile property ownerships, transfer of properties, things like go on. They have a hearing on the 3rd to approve that updated list. I don't see anything significant with that. There'll be maybe some other minor tweaks on the list, and I expect Ecology sometime in March to be shipping out the summons and the lawsuit to 10,000 plus folks in our county. Very expensive. That raises a lot of issues as an attorney with that many parties. The court had proposed a rule to require e-service, and this kind of relates to our broadband discussion, in that saying if a party in the case must use e-service, file and serve documents, and well, we know, and I've said, not everybody in this county has broadband. Not everybody has e-service, electronic email, so we can't use that. You know, so in a lawsuit, typically, if you have an unrepresented litigant and they're a party, they have to provide their email or their mailing address, and we send pleadings out to that party. Well, if there's, in the main case, is 10,000 plus parties, you have to mail a motion of notice of appearance to 10,000 parties. And so you can imagine a small homeowner who has an issue that wants to appear in the case, maybe not represented by a lawyer, but then he would have, and isn't connected to the internet, has to mail a piece of paper to 10,000 parties. So you can imagine how burdensome this can become. So the court had created this committee, and we are looking at the rules that the court proposed for e-service. We think, listen to the court clerk, we've convinced them to not require e-service, but then that drives a lot of issues procedurally of how you go through litigation with 10,000 parties, some electronically connected, some are not electronically connected parties. So how do we have everybody have an opportunity for notice and participation? So in a lot of these large adjudication cases throughout the West, there is a docket sheet, and that's a sheet that gets published by the court that lists every pleading file. And so the court may publish that weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, and then hopefully a court or some entity has those documents linked. So in the Yakima case, Ecology managed the documents and a summary of the documents that was published when the court issued a docket sheet. Ecology hasn't stepped up and made that offering to bear those costs, nor has the court ordered that. The county has acquired software that seems to be more limited than at least what the lawyers would like to see in terms of disclosure of notice. It's not as flexible as, say, the federal court system, which uses a PACER system. They have a Tyler Tech technology integrating with Odyssey, which the court uses for its record keeping. So I'm getting in the weeds here, I realize, but we're trying to, at the committee level, understand what the ability of the software is so that we can understand how a party might get notice of a pleading. And I'll use some real life examples of why this matters. And then how we have notice. And so what we're leaning to is, and the court believes, the committee rather believes, we shouldn't just adopt a rule, say how you do e-service or not how you do service, without understanding how litigation will unfold in motions practice, because just adopting one rule, not having a suite rule, ends up piecemealing rule adoption that may not integrate. So you have a docket sheet, it says it's published weekly, but what does that mean? How do I get notice of a pleading? Do I get sent the notice? When do I have to file? When do I have to provide a response? How do I get the documents? We're not trying to push the burden on individual parties to go mail things to everybody. But how do we have effective notice and time for response? In a traditional case, you file a motion with the court. Court has all civil hearings on a Friday afternoon. You have to file your motion 9 days before the hearing. And then you have to file a reply 5 days or before the hearing, and then, so you get some process. The rules spell this out. For more substantive motion, it's about a month time frame to file in advance and then go from there. So I realize we're in the weeds. So we are looking at the court saying it's gonna publish a docket sheet monthly. That is deemed, we will have a list of all the pleadings. We're trying to find out how much summary of what is in there. So rather than just saying motion, well, was this a motion to determine the scope of the adjudication of the boundaries, or is it just a motion to substitute a party or a substitute of an attorney? You know, what's substantive motion, what's a more procedural motion? How can we get some descriptions in there? Then we're gonna say that service is effective 5 days after a matter is published on the docket sheet. So that puts the onus on parties to say, we know the docket sheet is gonna be published the last Friday of a month. Everyone will know that. They then can go to the court and look at it, or go online to look at what's on the docket sheet, and then have a place to go retrieve the documents. That way, if you don't sign up for e-service, the onus would be on you to go to the court and find the document. But it's available, it's there, and there's a method, and you'll have 5 days from this date that we all know when to check. Either at the court or online, and that is the most effective way we've come up with, or that we're discussing, to avoid this mass mailing. So you have service and an opportunity for notice, but the onus is on the party to go find the information, rather than saying, well, I'm just gonna be mailing stuff out and I'm gonna have a mailbox filled with parties. Because 10,000 mailings, yeah, whatever stamp is today. What's the stamp? 60 something cents? Yeah, you can imagine how expensive this is gonna be, and if it's not just a couple and it's got some weight, you're gonna be $1.20, $1.50, $3 for mailing. And so how do you manage this cost to parties that would traditionally be borne in litigation by parties versus and enable per service without having each service? So that's what we're manning through. Then we're trying to say, okay, once it's on the docket sheet, you have notice. The court, we're asking the court, we'll probably be asking the court to set a specific day a month that they hear water right matters. So the fourth Thursday of every month in the morning is water court. And so you end up saying, well, once it's on the docket sheet, you have 2 weeks to file a reply. So the onus will be on individuals to look at the docket sheet, either online or at the court, and they'll post them in libraries and do other things. And then find the documents and go through that method. Otherwise, we're gonna be back to personal service and mailing, and in the traditional litigation, that's gonna be highly burdensome and costly to individuals. And so we're trying to manage that, how we strike that balance. There is the possibility that there'll be subcases, and we know in Aquavella, they had subcases by geography, meaning that they took an area like Bertrand Creek. We're just gonna go through all of the claims for water rights in the Bertrand Creek Basin. Everything else is on hold. When we finish Bertrand Creek, we'll go to Fish Trap, or we'll go to Great Harbor, or wherever, and the Aquabella also had a major, claimant, which had a lot of the municipals, the big irrigation districts, things like that. But we have not heard from Ecology how they intend to propose, or if they intend to propose to divide this into subcases. That's still possible. So we're trying to, we have a committee that's, 15, 20 tribal attorneys, ag attorneys, ourselves, other municipal lawyers. We've shared the draft rules that we had prepared last year with Lemmy, just a minute, we get through this. And, I took the onus to draft the first kind of redraft of some of these motion practices and timeframes, sent that out, but we are now meeting weekly. We intend to ask the court some questions at this February 3rd meeting to get some clarity what the court wants, because this is all in the court's decision, not ours. This is all what the court decides to do. And then to try to draft some rules and things like that. So that's kind of what's going on. We're very active. Chris, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to observe that if not to prejudge anything, but if you end up with sub basins, it doesn't mean that everybody else can go away until that's resolved, because we may have a stake in that sub basin.
Well, and that's a great example on why I'm really the one saying notice and notice and notice is the key thing. We want to have effective service, but notice. And for example, when we get into municipal water law issues, what if they say, we're gonna do the Sumas Basin first? And Sumas has water rights, and Ecology asserts its interpretation of the municipal water law that many of the municipalities disagree with, and we're dealing in that context again with and this is all public, so I'm not speaking of a confidential matter, but the inchoate water that Ecology's restraining in its interpretation of the municipal water law. Well, what happens if that occurs first in the Sumas Basin? Well, we're gonna want to appear and litigate that, and so will a number of other utilities and municipalities will want to appear in that. So we have to have a method that we can effectively find out what's going on in the sub-basin of these issues. And then do we take that issue and leave it in the sub-basin, or do we move to have that in another sub-case that might be basin-wide issues and move that over? So how do we assure we have notice of what's going on in a sub-basin so that we can participate? Because everybody in the adjudication is a party.
Sorry, John, I
And-
don't mean to cut you off. It's what you're talking about is really important. I do want to move the conversation along, and I want to say that to a significant degree, what you're talking about here, John, extends beyond the boundaries of the PUD and deals with the larger community. And I'm very sympathetic of being a rural resident of Whatcom County on a private well, and have made many friendships with people that I worry might be disenfranchised in the adjudication process personally. I want to the degree that you can, John, take into the consideration of those people who are in your group, right? You've got a committee. Try to take into consideration, John, those people that are disenfranchised to the best of your ability.
I would say two things. I carefully would use the word disenfranchised. I would say the non-electronic claimants, meaning they don't have electronic access to the proceedings. We are very mindful of those, and we're trying to design rules that would be effective for them without placing the burden of cost, which could be incredibly costly and burdensome. If they have to provide every time they want to file their claim with the court, if it has to be served to everybody, if they have to, any pleading they want to submit has to go to everybody, that'd be incredibly burdensome on the small well owner. So how is the effective participation? So we're trying to find a way to have service that doesn't require mailing, but has an opportunity for them to find out, and that would be deemed effective. So we've been very mindful of that in this process. I think the court would be too. Again, these are court rules. The court will typically, unless it's an emergency rule, will publish its proposed rules for comment before they adopt them. This is kind of a preliminary process to draft the rules or make some recommendations to the court that the court would then propose. So unless it's an emergency rule, there will be a process for parties to look at and make comments on. Typically.
Certainly, I don't know if the county council is interested in your presentation from your committee, but they might care about this issue as well, and the approach that the committee is taking.
Well, the committee, we'll ask our questions on Friday in open court for some guidance, and then whatever we produce as proposed rules will go to the court and be a public record, and folks can comment on them. And what we propose isn't the rule, the court has to adopt that.
Well, is there any more comments from the commission or questions or clarifications from staff?
Sounds awful.
It is.
Yeah.
So John, are you building a whole new wing to your office to handle all the paperwork that's gonna come with it?
We're hoping it's electronic.
I don't know if libraries can help, but I do know, I visited a couple of libraries and they do have adjudication folders or file cabinets already set up. And I don't know to what degree they can be an assistance in addition to instead of having to go to the courthouse, particularly on weekends for people
So
who.
the court won't control libraries, and much like they don't control cities. So the court has indicated they will send the docket sheet to libraries and to the small cities so that they're available to look at in those areas, and they can send to those places electronically, so they accessible if you go into a library, get on a computer, or if they print it out, it'd be accessible. The dockets, the documents, the court, there's not gonna be a link on the docket sheet to say, oh, motion, click, it pops up. They're not gonna have that type of software system. Their system is not capable of doing that. So they have a couple of other methods to try to look at the documents. It may be just going to court and asking to look at the file in court. And I'm not sure if they're gonna populate all the documents at the libraries, but that'll be something the court and administration of court's working out. But we have consistently said you need to have accessible documents for the parties to this case to find if we want to avoid personal service. And this is a shortcoming, in my view, and this is John Sitkin comment, not the PUDs, that the software selected a couple of years ago by the state and by the county may have been a cost decision without factoring what the needs of the parties were, and just looked at what was efficient for the court operations without considering some of the issues the litigants have. This is a firm discussion I began having with the court, administration of the courts over a year and a half ago. But that they had already selected the software. They were trying to get ready in advance of everything and knowing this was coming, and probably part of the reason why Ecology delayed in its initial filing to get some of these processes behind the scenes set up. But it's what we're dealing with.
Dang. You know, I've lived just about as remote as a person can, with no access to internet. And, you know, an hour away from the closest town. But we did go to the post office once a week, you know, and we had a phone. You know, most people still have a landline. There's no way to send some sort of communication by telephone.
10,000 plus parties.
Like an auto recorded.
Every time there's a filing, we might have 80 filings in a day, and you know, that's overly burdensome. And then what happens if it didn't happen right? Then you didn't have service, so you have to restart. So we're trying to have something that is clear, particular, parties can know how to find it, and absent of personal service. And
There's no precedent for this kind of proceeding at this, with this number of claimants that precedes our electronic systems.
not that we're aware of. And people have been looking around what's happened in Klamath, what's happened in Sand River, what's happened in Idaho, the Snake River Basin. This is just, I think this is a case unlike any other.
And you said how many,
There'll be at least 10,000 parties and over 30,000 claims.
those lacking
No idea, no idea, no idea. We have no way of knowing.
Well, just merely, okay, but just merely that every claimant needs to be updated every time there's any filing from anyone.
Yeah.
That's the whole.
And that's one thing, so they wanna take it into some cases, so now maybe there's a smaller group you have to, just the Bertrand Creek claims, cause we've defined that boundary. So now we've shrunk it, it's still gonna be a lot. 500 is a lot for service, 100 is a lot of people to be mailing to if you're in a case.
So commission, is there something that we have to offer here where we can actually potentially, provide input to John, or maybe we should table this for a future conversation under old business on adjudication, and think about what our thoughts are. But right now, I think we understand the magnitude of the problem, and I'm not sure any of us have useful solutions at this point.
Atul, but I think it's really important that we discuss this, because I don't know about either of you, but I get questions all of the time about how this is going to play out, and I have no idea. So it's very helpful to hear from John that, what they're trying to do and what the hitch in the giddy up is. And, it's really hard to assure constituents that they're gonna be okay when we don't even know what the process is going to look like yet. So I don't know if I don't have any answers, but I definitely appreciate the discussion.
Me too, yeah. I guess we got time to discuss it, right?
There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes and trying to address this. We're all working on it, trying to find a solution. There'll be some outputs to the court later this month. And then we committed to trying to find some rules by the end of February, get into the court by mid-February, some rules on this so that they can be in place when the college is serving. Because as the rules stand by court order today, no one can appear and bring a motion without the court's permission. So I can't just typical case file a notice of appearance and file a motion. You have to, they were waiting till the summons is served. Once the summons is served, it could be Katie bar the door, everyone's out, can file motions. The folks from Sumas that want to argue whether they should be in or out of the adjudication, others can start filing it. How do we get notice? And what's our time frame for filing responses? So these things have to be sorted out before Ecology sends out the summons. So that's what's going on.
Well, I do appreciate you keeping us abreast of the challenges.
Yeah, that's valuable for you to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, yeah, I don't see what we can offer at this point. It sounds like, yeah, absolutely. Some innovative solutions are needed, and we do appreciate you working on it, John, if that's the most the PUD can provide at this point.
Yeah, and I want to repeat again, is that I think that I don't know if the county council is getting a briefing on this from somebody. That's not your job, of course, John, but I hope somebody's giving the county council a briefing on this, because, they're the only body of local government that can address the 10 to 30,000 rural water users that, again, I've stated along this whole process who I'm worried about.
So I would just say, from the separation of powers concept, there's not a lot that the county can do with the court other than provide funding. They have no control or means to control the court other than funding.
Yeah, but that Office of Adjudication Support that the county's created can also be a force multiplier. That those people can, copy and get information to the libraries or whatever. These crazy things.
That AOC I referred to as a state agency, and they're providing support to the county courts right now.
Yeah. Okay.
All
All right. Anything else on adjudication? All righty, let's move on. So next item I think is geothermal, is it?
And this should be relatively brief. We got notified by the NOOCSAC that our consultant, Hero, for this pre-feasibility study is going to be ready early in February to at least preview what their results are. And Andrew and I and Eddie have been invited to the readout, which I think is February 7th. Is that right? It's early in February, so.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so, and two things, one, I'll be able to report back to the commission as a whole once we find out what's in the report. And then, two, I think we wanna make sure that I've requested that you be there, so, that would be something that you'd wanna have on the per diem discussion. And that'll be before our next meeting, so. Want to bring that up so we didn't forget about it.
Oh, thank you.
And that's actually it on geothermal.
Great.
Good question. Then jumping to the strategic plan, I already updated on that. So I think unless there's any other questions on that, we should be good to go with old business.
All right, great. Anything else on the strategic planning? Okay, let's move on to new business. And I think action item 1 is NC.
That's correct, and I'd like to call on Rebecca to do a quick introduction, and she can tell us a little bit about our guest and bring that person on board.
Good morning, commissioners. Happy beautiful day here, even though it's cold. This is our annual request from the Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association, or NC. And I would like to introduce James. He is the lead on taking, now correct me if I'm wrong, James, but you are the lead that takes out the groups that does a lot of this habitat restoration and works on and manages all of that. So he's just going to give you a little update on what they've been doing. And if you have a PowerPoint, I think Mike can just get you to share. He'll take care of you to share that. So welcome, James. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you all for the opportunity to present. Can you all see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, as Rebecca was saying, I'm James Vandervoort. I'm the riparian project manager for Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association. Roughly anything that has to do with planting, terrestrial, anything above ordinary high water mark is my department. My cohort, Eli DeWitt, handles all the in-stream projects. Usually how we do this, I've just been presenting, I think last year was my first time, but I kind of presented what we had done with some of the funding, what your funding has helped us do in the past few years. So for 2024, I'm James Vandervoort, riparian project manager. Eli is the in-stream project manager. Our in-house field technician crew is made up of 5 18 to 25-year-olds. Wow, some of them are older now. They've been with me since they were 18 to 25. That's when they started. So they're kind of like stuck in my head there. But Emily, Devin, Megan, Tessa, and Will, 3 of them have been with me for 5-6 years. So I really rely on their experience and knowledge to help me through these projects. We also share a Washington Conservation Corps crew with Whatcom County. The crew works on both county projects and NC projects. They are on a separate calendar than it's not a fiscal calendar year. So the 23-24 crew is made up here. That's Devin, Bree, Meredith, Liz, Caitlin, and Oliver is our new supervisor, as I recently left that position. And then our new crew now is made up of Zoe, Maddie, Oliver's still with us as the supervisor. Liz came back for a second year as the assistant, and Emmanuel and Renee. So the Washington Conservation Corps is a Department of Ecology program, AmeriCorps program housed within Department of Ecology. It is made up of 5 18 to 25-year-olds and 1 Department of Ecology supervisor. I roughly think of it as a contracted group of 18 to 25-year-olds to do field work, and part of it is job training. So these young folks are with us for a year to 2 years, and then they move on to bigger, better things. So it's job training on our end. It's similar to how we used to have internship positions, but it's slightly not more valuable, but I can throw them into a little tougher situations than I would with your average intern or volunteer. So for 2024, I just wanted to kind of recap what your funding has helped us achieve. We installed 24,500 native trees and shrubs at 31 project sites along 23 different water bodies in Whatcom County. We maintained 93.6 acres at 56 project sites. That includes brush cutting, weed whacking, so cutting back mechanical removal or management of invasive weed species around our planting projects, as well as some herbicide application or digging up of roots to release those sites from those invasive weeds. We have also started going back to our legacy projects. So anything that is 20 years old, with the transition from my predecessor to me, he picked up in the archives and kind of digitized, brought all of the older projects into my databases. And so I went from having 200 projects that I managed to 400 that I have to think about. A lot of these older projects, the funding back then would handle 1 to 3 years, and then you walk away from the site. What I'm finding is a lot of them have not been fully walked away from. There are cages or blue tubes that are on these trees, and as you can imagine, a cage that is built to protect a sapling from deer and beaver will actually start harming a tree at 20 years old. So we've started a new volunteer program that we are taking groups of volunteers out to these older sites to release these trees from the cages that once protected them. And that's been a procedure, as you can imagine, with 400 sites. It's something to definitely get into. But we've gotten through one full site. It's 3.5 acres. And then we've got contacts with 2 other property owners. Like, these projects are 20 plus years old. There have been changes in contact information, changes in ownership. So it's taken quite a bit of time to kind of track that information down. For InStream, we completed 4 sites in 2024. There were 2 fully engineered bridges that were installed, 1 400-foot culvert removal, which was a daylighting project. The creek itself went through a culvert that was 100 feet underground. 1 farm crossing bridge was installed. 14 pieces of large woody debris were placed in creeks. And between those projects, there were 3 barrier culverts that were removed in the process. One aspect that we do is monitoring. So for any of our planting sites, we maintain and monitor for 5 years before we put it on a longer time scale. In 24, we monitored 110 planting polygons. We roughly, at any given site, we have multiple polygons drawn on a map based on when they were planted. But so we monitored through 110 of them at 47 past sites. This was on 30 water bodies. Overall survival that we're seeing across these sites is 93%, which is higher than what I was anticipating. I kind of attribute that to having a little bit more of a mild summer and a wetter spring last year. In total, my crews monitored 11,176 plants. These are just some of the key findings that we found. So I had them look at the survival rates for 5 different species. They're the most common ones that we use at survival sites. And we have seen an increase in survival in 24. Those are the blue lines on the left side of the screen, the red lines on the right. And then the map on the right was something that one of my technicians recently was promoted to, like a monitoring specialist. And I just kind of gave her free rein with the data. She started looking at the differences in survival based on when the plants were actually put in the ground. And, kind of sarcastically, a shocker, but plants that were installed in the fall survived better than plants that were installed in the spring. The caveat with this is these data sets aren't really large enough to, I wouldn't be writing a paper on these. These are kind of just how we manage our own projects, and it helps us to keep an eye on them and examine them annually to adjust any of our planting protocols. One of the projects that we're working on is a 10-year conifer monitoring study. For those of you that saw this last year, it's a similar thing that we just completed year 5 of monitoring these sites. When we initially realized that Western red cedars were struggling, and then further found that other people have researched this and are showing that there is a larger dieback on Western red cedars, we began testing out some other species. So we have incense cedar, Alaska yellow cedar, giant sequoia, coastal redwood, and we plant those 4 species in tandem with Western red cedars at it's about 15 sites. And then we're monitoring them once in the spring, once in the fall to look at survival, look at height and growth. We've recently rolled in students from Western Washington University and Skagit Valley Community College to make it a learning process for them as well, to see some on-the-ground monitoring protocols and help us out in analyzing the data. But what we're finding preliminarily is that the incense cedar is outperforming any of the other species, including our native Western red cedar. Alaska yellow cedar is roughly the same as as Western red cedar, and then the 2 sequoias are not doing as well. I think there's more to be looked at in that data. I don't think that directly means that any of them in particular would survive here. The way we built this study, they're roughly randomly spaced throughout project sites and across the county. I think if any of you are gardeners, you can kind of understand if you put a plant in a place that it doesn't want to grow, it's not going to grow. And you put them in a place that it does have favorable conditions, it will grow. So when we randomize that, there's going to be things that drop out there. But I think in our efforts, we are looking for our general plant that would benefit salmon and riparian habitats kind of across the board. We also monitor our in-stream projects. So this year we completed habitat assessments along 1.6 miles of stream at 11 different projects. We monitored 8 of these sites for spawning salmon, found salmon at 5 of them. These are often barriers that we removed. And so we're checking above where the barrier used to exist after completing a project and seeing if salmon could make it through the new bridge that we installed, a new culvert. Often it's a bridge. And then we are also continuing to collect temperature data from Whatcom Creek and 10 Mile Creek. We have compiled them into a way that we can analyze them, but we've hit some snags with higher flows and losing some of the temperature sensors. I'm hoping we can go find them when things dry out this summer. One thing that we completed this year was digitizing all of our projects and making an outreach map that we're hoping to be interactive and host on our website. So if you can see it, I printed out a quick version, but roughly all those blue dots are in-stream projects. The green dots, which are kind of buried by blue dots, are riparian projects. And then the red apples are where we have worked with students, 4th grade students through our Students for Salmon program. My hope is that this would be hosted online and people could go to it, click on one of the dots, learn a little bit about our project. It's just going to take a lot of backlogging to create these, we call them one-pagers for each of these project sites that I've never seen before. But that's kind of the end goal. And we've made the first step of creating the map and putting it in a form that could be presentable. It's just going to be backlogging the data to go with it. We are continuing with our drone monitoring. We picked up a few drones a few years ago, and it has allowed us to, this kind of a site, this is a new site we planted this year on East Hemi Road. This kind of a site I can monitor on the ground with a camera at this point, but as I'm going back to these 20-year-old sites, that same photo on the ground just shows you a wall of tree and you don't really see the scale. So the drone has allowed us to start going back, and when you pull back and you compare that to the initial on the ground photo, it really shows a drastic change. So we're creating protocols to get some of those aerials in the beginning and have that long-term viewpoint. And then it has also allowed us, some of our new sites are understory planting. So there is a deciduous forest already. And if I go out in the fall, I can spend 15 minutes flying over it and making a high resolution aerial map that shows me I would easily see where there are conifers and where there are not, so I can assess the sites at a much faster rate. You can imagine flying a drone for 15 minutes compared to me walking through a dense deciduous understory. There's a drastic difference in time and effort there. I wanted to share some upcoming things for 2025. We have 6, potentially 8 new Whatcom Conservation District funded projects that we should be getting into this spring. We recently received salmon recovery funding for the next 5 years. That will help on some of these projects that are out on the Nooksack. We're going to prepare 3 of them for 2026. 1 of them will be slated to plant this year. We have secured a contract with Lummi Natural Resources to do planting out on the Nooksack Delta. Nooksack itself has partnered with us to plant one of their bigger in-stream projects on South Fork. I apologize, that should say Nooksack, not Lummi. And then there are 6 new NC in-stream projects slated for this year. For monitoring, I'm looking at 111 young planting projects to get the crews out to. I would like to re-examine our protocols because as I'm getting to 111, when I was a member, when I was a crew lead, it was not 111, it was maybe 50, 60. As you can imagine, 111 sites that need maintenance and then monitoring, we're going to run out of time. So I think I need to adjust our protocols a little bit, find some efficiency there. I need to create a plan for legacy site monitoring. So our older project sites, I'm hoping to look at not just what does a site need, what do we need to release these trees from their cages, Bluetooths, anything like that. But I would also like to potentially look at success. How did our 20-year-old plantings do? See if there's anything that we can learn from these that potentially would help us in the future. We are possibly partnering with City of Bellingham to help them do spawner surveys on Squalicum Creek, Chuckanut Creek, and Padden, maybe Whatcom. They're kind of going back and forth. We recently received a donation of mycorrhizal inoculants that I'm hoping to test out on one of my large sites this spring and see what kind of benefits that poses to riparian plantings in this area. And then for nursery changes, we're also starting a gravel bed, which is a new thing that one of the local nurseries has done to increase the amount of bare root plants that we can plant in the early fall. And then we also, through the Whatcom Conservation District, got a refrigerator trailer that will help us hold our bare root plants and our live stakes at a proper temperature without them kind of expiring before we can get them in the ground. And in working with them, we're hoping to possibly rent this out to local farmers that might use it to hold their vegetables, whatever it may be, as they're getting ready to go to a farmer's market. As I will only need to be using this for a certain time of the year, but that's very early. We just picked it up the other week, so it's kind of just all planned. But those are kind of the fun things that I was excited for this year that I thought I'd share with y'all. This is what our in-stream schedule looks like. We have 2 large woody debris projects, 4 or 5 barrier culverts. Sorry, this isn't really my stuff, so I'm gonna catch up as I go. But there's some really cool projects. The Kenny Creek on the top is a partnership between Whatcom County, NC, and Whatcom Land Trust with 3-4 different funding sources. I've had volunteers out there helping to prep the site for planting. If you've ever been out North Fork Road, that's the area where the river took out a huge chunk of the road a few years back in the main flooding. County's going to replace that culvert. Once this project is done, there will be access to Spring Chinook to Kenny Creek, which has not been there since the fish ladders were installed ages ago by Fish and Wildlife. So that one's probably the one I'm most excited for. And any questions?
Yeah, any questions from the commission?
James, how much of your funding stream is federal, if any?
Yeah, there's some. It's definitely changed this year. I would say so. I don't know the numbers for all of NC. I'm relatively new to the budgeting process for us, and historically we've been lucky enough to receive funding from Whatcom Community Foundation and you folks. So a lot of state funding, a lot of federal funding is really focused on endangered species listed fish. So Chinook, steelhead, which then would focus us mostly on the rivers, the forks, and a few water bodies. The reason we really like the funding from you folks and the funding that we've received from the other foundations is that it opens us up to any other watershed in the county. Outside of that, it's really difficult to find funding for those programs. And both tribes, county, land trust, everyone is so focused in those areas already that we found we were really competing with them. And, for our in-stream projects, the level of liability that comes with doing any sort of large woody debris on the river skyrockets compared to what we do on streams, and is really difficult for us to manage. So having said, I guess that's context, but having said all that, it's not a lot. It's definitely changing. The main foundation that's been funding us for the past few years, I think, sunset their gift this year. So this is the last year I'll get funding from them. There might be other opportunities that come up in the future, but that's all I know for now, right? And so it's not huge. For myself, it's pretty minimal, maybe 25% for the riparian portion. There's a few that are coming from NRCS or USDA at the federal level, but come through Whatcom Conservation District. So it's not, I guess in our books, it's not seen as federal, but varying levels of that. Most of our funding, I would say, comes from foundations, local entities like you all, or conservation. The Conservation District has really, been fortunate in the opportunities that they've received from some of their funding sources and are able to then flex to us, flex to the other contractors in the region. And I think this first year of mine has been kind of a doozy with changing how funding works for us, but a lot of our funding and projects are coming from the conservation district at this point.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that you're not relying on federal funding.
Yes.
There were freeze on grants and loans, so,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Eddie, any questions?
Well, no, this is all really wonderful to learn about your good work, and yeah, we're happy to be able to contribute toward making it happen.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for coming and presenting. We have now, I would say, an established and long-held relationship, thanks to Rebecca for stewarding this relationship and bring it to the PUD's portfolio of things that we're doing in the community that don't directly relate to Cherry Point. This isn't one of the many good things the PUD does, and really grateful for that. We have a long-held relationship, as Commissioner Arnett said. We're curious and a little bit worried on your behalf about this change in the federal landscape. I attended the Whatcom Conservation District meeting yesterday, and there is worry at the Conservation District on their federal funding, which would obviously impact their downstream partners. I just want to say, as a commissioner, as one commissioner speaking purely for myself, that I see us as long-term friends, and if stuff happens, obviously I can't promise what we'll be able to do to help, but consider us a real friend of NC, and come talk to us, and appreciate all you're doing.
Yes, thank you.
Lastly, into your second to last slide, if you can go back to it. There you have the project length column and improved access of stream habitat. So just to make sure I understand correctly, for example, in the Duffner Ditch project, working on 50 feet actually removes a bottleneck that allows salmon to go almost 3 miles more upstream.
Yeah.
I mean, what a bang for the buck that is.
Right.
And if you want to talk about the value that NC delivers, that's the way to look at it. You're removing bottlenecks that aren't just relevant for salmon. They're relevant for all the life forms that are in the river. And that's a win for all of us.
Yeah, right. And then some of these, once we get in with these landowners, then their neighbors are seeing something that happened on their project, or they're seeing how a lot of the times these ones are farm crossings. Like, we are not on the river system predominantly. So a lot of it is just these culvert removals for local ag owners that have old farm crossings that were put in when they were kids, when they, their grandparents were running the farm, whatever it may be. And for them to not have to pay for, like, we come in and through the conservation district, through other funding sources, if we need to, are replacing these at no cost to them, which is great for them and their farm as well, right? Like, a lot of these bridges that I've seen, these culverts, I don't know if I'd take a tractor over them. And so we're replacing with something that helps the longevity of their farm. So I really see this too as, yes, huge benefit for salmon, right? This is an upfront, we remove that and salmon can get past it. There is an immediate increase, where my riparian projects take 50 years to see any sort of benefit to them. But it's also building the community. I think continuing to work with these local ag owners is huge for us.
Yeah, and when Commissioner suggested I go on the Whatcom Conservation District tour this last year, which thank you so much, Jamie, for that. Really enjoyed it. And I wanted to share that one of the farm residents, loved their bridge so much, they started doing cocktail parties on the bridge.
Yeah. Yep.
And because it was a scenic spot, right, with a little creek going underneath it. So anyway, I wanted to share that. Thank you, James.
Yep. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm gonna-
James. Appreciate it. Now
I'm
we need
gonna-
a motion. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'm going to move, we approve funding the amount of $20,000 for Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association to support Washington Conservation Corps work and habitat restoration projects for 2025.
And I'll gladly second the motion.
There's a motion and the second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's move on then. The other item under new business, I believe, is with our.
Hello again, Commissioners.
Oh, please go ahead, Garrett. It's a complete design, right?
Correct, complete design incorporated. We're requesting your guys' approval. We want to have complete design, look at some possible options for work at the Plant 1 intake facility. As you know, we have a couple times throughout the year, every year, have divers come in to get sediment out of the Plant 1 intake. I've shown some pictures where we've had a lot of we put it into what we call the frog pond at Plant 1. A lot of sediment comes out of the river, and one of the really big problems with that is we have divers that come here 2, 4, 6 days a year, and they go underneath the water and they do some work for us, and sure, they took some dirt out, but we have really no idea what they're doing under there. I mean, we know that we see the intake screens are cleaner. We see some work being done, but they come up from being underneath the water and say, oh yeah, we replaced this this length of pipe and we're done. And we have to go, okay, we think this is what you did. So what we want to look at is breaking the wet well of the intake. Not breaking it, is we want to separate it into different areas and be able to de-water it and have our own crew go down there and look at our air burst system, all of our piping down there, and we could actually really get some work done and have a good record, take pictures, and develop a database of what we've got going on down there. So what we're just trying to get some ideas from our engineers to how we could separate our wells, how we can keep the river water out for temporary time, dewater, and get down there and work on our equipment with our own crews, our own eyes, and know what's going on down there. So right now we're just trying to get some studies done and get some options of how we can maybe make that happen.
Thank you, Garrett. Any questions from the commission?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and, Garrett, this is, it seems to me this fits in with the other things you've talked about.
Commissioner, it's Kurt Wank. that you're
Kurt.
talking to.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, Kurt. I have a disability as Annette can attest to. So apologize for that, Kurt. Really.
That's okay.
But thank you. So I wanted to say that this reminds me of some of the other things you've talked about today. And basically about increasing the observability and controllability of our operation.
Mm-hmm.
And this ability to control the intakes into different chambers is increasing our controllability and also observability, right? Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct. That's our goal.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the whole vision for the Plant 1 rebuild is going to be a whole level higher.
We're trying. I think we have a great crew, and every day we're looking at ways to improve our process.
Well, I'm ready to make
Questions. Yeah, so I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I move we approve the work order number 3 with complete design for engineering services for a cost not to exceed $120,000 and authorize the district's general manager, Chris, to execute the work order.
Second.
As a motion and the second, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Great, thanks, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. All right, so moving on from new business, we have commissioner reports. So I think I'll go last. So Commissioner Arnett, do you have any reports?
Not really anything exciting. I did attend the online WAPUDA meetings, which was great. And I plan on attending in person next month for February, but I need to get some information on which hotels we stay at because I can't remember.
It's too late to go into the good one.
It is?
Yeah, Tom
Already?
Place is already sold out. I booked it for March for I think you can still do March. But so there's of course the DoubleTree, which is on the same side of the highway. And then the Hilton, which is on the other side of the highway, which you absolutely can't walk from.
There's also the Red Line, which is what I booked for.
The Governor. Yeah, just check under the bed.
Good advice. I want to stay somewhere decent.
They're all pretty close to the offices on the hill.
Okay.
Commissioner Yuri.
Well, I also had the pleasure of attending the WAPUDA board meetings and new commissioner orientation, and that was, let's say, 2 weeks ago. And yeah, it was really very much enjoyed meeting other commissioners from across the state. You know, some who have been doing this for decades, others who are new to it like me. And yeah, definitely it was a very warm reception, and also had very warm regards communicated to me about my fellow commissioners. It's nice to hear that Whatcom PD is well regarded. And as far as in the committee meetings, I sat in as a new lead on the energy committee. Appreciated Commissioner Deshmani being there as well for that. And in the government affairs committee meetings. And I guess, and hearing some, I guess I could speak at least into the energy related legislative agenda. Very interesting to hear and continue to learn more in the weekly updates about WAPUDA's lobbying efforts. It's extended over into the Energy Northwest board meetings I attended the following week, and an event we did a little legislative reception with WAPUDA on in the Capitol building. And I guess I'd say it's something I'd like to perhaps discuss further, or maybe we could put on the agenda for a future meeting, as far as recognizing wherein we're a member of this association, and as given like our relatively the limited extent to which a certain legislation might impact us as a utility versus other PUDs around the state. And some different views on that, how we might go about, or what's the precedent for how we might go about like communicating with that. Because I'm interested in having more discussions with the PUD staff about some things. I did sign up to attend next month's WAPUDA meetings, including the lobby day on the Hill, where commissioners, there's I guess tradition for the last decade or so of just giving out free coffees.
It's great.
In the entryway to the Capitol. And so I did sign up for that, but recognizing that I'm not necessarily in full agreement on every bill that WAPUDA is lobbying on. I think there was for the most part, they all sound good to me. There was about 3 where I think recognizing, understanding concerns being communicated, something I'd like to perhaps discuss more, but it's hard to know where things are going to move. Recognizing, however, though, that Whatcom PUD now, because our delegation, our Senator Schumake from 42nd District is now chair of the Environment, Energy, Telecom Committee. And there are certain bills where WAPUDA's, there's a WAPUDA requested bill, for instance, I think it's 5445, regarding compliance pathways with the Energy Independence Act. And right now, it's just been introduced and they're just trying to get it a hearing. And just get that first step of being read and moving at all, which is one where, you know, we might be in a position to actually help with, right? Being closer to certain legislators. I know I am also the House committee chair, the history with, and some other members, you know, on those committees. So I just wanted to kind of like, I don't know, just hear more from your thoughts on that as far as the legislative agenda, what was discussed.
Well, I just wanna, so I've been passionately opposed to some of the things that WAPUDA put forward. And they're really good about hearing feedback. But I think the board agrees on WAPUDA's legislative agenda. And I've, Atul was present when I've had to speak out against that. But
And I think we did, I think we made a difference.
Yeah, and I think that maybe the needle is moving slightly, but it's part of a democratic process, you know, if we get outvoted, we get outvoted. But it's good to show up and to state your piece. And then, you know, still go in favor of the things that you favor, and it's fine to speak out against the ones that you disagree with, but we are part of WAPUDA, so you know, we have to go along with what their agenda is in the end. And what I mean by that is that they're not going to change their agenda to appease one PUD or one commissioner. Yeah.
Right, and at this point, of course, I'm fully supportive of us being a member and participating, and yeah, if we're not in the majority on something, we're not, you know, we could vote, we only have like a seat at the table as far as discussing bills, and perhaps bringing a different perspective in, which I know is welcome there. So there was, for instance, there's concerns expressed about this environmental justice bill that's been for the last couple of sessions, pushed forward by Front Center organizations, Statewide Coalition, some other environmental groups, and many others, communities around the state, that it's just concerns bringing in environmental justice considerations directly into the State Environmental Policy Act review process for projects, which could obviously, and I think concerns are well expressed, impact potentially, you know, lead to making it harder to permit, say, new substations or expansions of transmission infrastructure. It affects the organization, and it's one where I don't have an issue with WAPUDA communicating on it for the whole organization. It's one that I'd still be interested in discussing more with them. And being in my first meeting there, didn't really feel comfortable raising my hand and like popping up on first day to get into a debate about something. So likewise, there's a new bill put forward that has, I think, co-sponsors in the 40th and 42nd, I think, on transmission, on just creating a new office within Commerce that would focus on just trying to basically just address this issue that utilities and businesses have been having in building new energy infrastructure, with the aid of trying to, work through those barriers that can pop up that, through just local level opposition, like seen recently to battery energy storage projects in Skagit County.
So if I can suggest something, why don't we plan either on or before February 11th, which is our next commission meeting, a commission work session to go through, let each of the commissioners come forward with bills or policy issues that we want to get on the same page on, and discuss. Let me throw that on the table and for consideration in response to what you're saying, Eddie. You wanted to have a follow-up, and we could do it on the 11th. I don't know how busy the agenda is currently looking for the 11th, or slightly before that, but certainly not later, because we're all going to WAPUDA after that. And it'd be great for us all to be cohesive before we go.
Thank you. I think the 11th would be a good time, if we just made it a item just to at least check in on, as far as then if I'm going to you know, at the next committee meeting, right, if there's discussion about a bill that I know that I'm not just representing my own view, I can speak comfortably on behalf of the commission within the boundaries we agree on. That would be helpful on the 11th, I think.
What do you think about Commissioner Arnett? And then, of course, Chris, what do you think about that?
Well, I just look at it mechanically in terms of the time.
Yeah.
If we're gonna include this in a regular commission meeting, I could see it would be, you know, each one of you would have something to say on every bill. And I mean, just, it's predictable. And it would be, we'd have to add 3 hours to the meeting or eliminate virtually everything else from the meeting. And I'm okay either way. It's your meeting.
Well, I don't think we necessarily need to discuss every bill. I might just bring a few up, you know, perhaps, you know, again, in 2 weeks from now, they might, you know, we'll know a little bit more about where things are at, or, you know, hear testimony from others, so.
Could you email Chris a list of the bills that you have concerns with, and then you could email all of us so we can like look up the language of that bill, so we can at least be prepared in advance?
Why don't each of you send me all the ones that you're concerned with,
Okay,
and then I'll put out a consolidated list,
okay,
and then there's no crosstalk or anything.
yeah.
Yeah, I would love, yeah, be able to.
And then we'll look, can we bound the conversation, commissioners, to 1 hour on the 11th?
I think it'll have to be less than that. We got a whole agenda for the 11th. That's,
Would 45 minutes be, would that fit within our meeting time?
Again, I support what Chris is saying. That's why I said before, the 11th is okay too. We could do a 1 hour or 2 hour meeting Friday afternoon too, if that works for people.
Friday next week? Or-
Before the 11th. I
Yeah.
guess that'd be Friday, the 7th.
Yeah, I mean, a special meeting, since I raised it, of course, I'm happy to do that.
I mean, Jamie, you've been open to afternoon meetings. I don't know what's going on.
yeah, I mean, I would prefer to do that than try to jam it into a morning session, because I got a whole job after this.
Right.
I will say though that I feel for you going in there the first time, and last year I fought tooth and nail over a couple of things that impacted low income customers, and at the end of the day, I was heard but not agreed with. So
Well, no, but I think you still make an impact, Commissioner Net. I think you do. I think people listen to that, and it does have an impact. It's what I love about WPUD is they do listen. I mean, I've been part of bodies where I say things and I know they're not even listening.
yeah,
I feel like no matter how small the impact might be, it's an impact. Nobody gets ignored at WPUD, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about WPUD.
So next steps.
Right.
You guys are gonna send me the bills you're interested in. I'll send out the consolidated list. And then we're gonna arrange for a workshop tentatively scheduled the afternoon of the 7th.
yes.
That might conflict with our,
Well, it shouldn't
geothermal.
conflict with the geothermal.
Is that in the morning? I
I
just
think that was in the morning, but I wouldn't want to schedule conflict, of course not.
Yeah. So I will go ahead and work with Joseph. We'll get a schedule out, proposed schedule to you guys, and move on.
That is much appreciated. So still on just my report, you mentioned, so I am putting in a per diem request for the meeting on, I believe it's the 7th.
Well, now it'll be regardless.
Yeah, right, same day as the other one, perfect.
If not, it'll be a separate request.
Then it would be, yeah, and apologies, I'm just kind of getting used to how we do things here, as in, on my prior, I'm not sure, do I need to put a new request for the mid-February WPUD meetings now?
No,
or would that be
those
the
are
next
standard.
meeting? Those are all standard, it would only be for
Yeah.
additional,
Right. It'll only be for
yeah.
the non-approved.
No, not those that are not on the pre-approved list.
gotcha, okay. So the geothermal presentation being the only one, I think at this point,
Similar.
that's not otherwise on the
And
list,
we talked
yeah.
about in April, but that'll be a later meeting.
That'll be later, since you brought it up though, so mid-April, well, there's the Northwest Public Power Organization Conference in Spokane, but it happens to actually overlap with WPUD meetings in Tri-Cities. that, I am particularly interested to make it out to Tri-Cities, and at that time perhaps, because opportunity will be open to, in April, during those meetings, to tour the Columbia Generating Station, which is going through a planned, outage, for the first time in it'll be almost 2 years, which is, they're already past a record of continuous, operation for the nuclear power plant. But yeah, since the invitation was extended to be able to tour that and see parts of the plant that, you can only see when it's shut down. It sounds really cool. I think for other commissioners, if they wanted to, and I also just, to see Energy Northwest headquarters in Tri-Cities. So, we'll come back to that, but, yeah, looking at more, in April, there's more planned meetings in March. It's cool that there's so much on the calendar and be able to, as I'm in my kind of my learning process, on the Energy Northwest, I don't take too much more time, but, since I was the delegate for Energy Northwest meetings, there was a whole lot covered, granted mostly focused on, nuclear issues, within, dealing with, exploring, some expansions and upgrades, expand capacity of the existing plant, as well as, this new nuclear project, with using, small modular reactors, with, now plans in the works where Amazon company will be, financing feasibility studies, for several reactors. I think there's a lot of promise in this. I think there's still a lot of question marks about ultimately what the cost is going to be, cost effectiveness overall. But that's something we'll be following, and also progress being made with the Ruby Flat Solar project. It's good to hear. And what else? I don't know. Need a full. I guess I'm not sure exactly to what extent, like how much I'm supposed to report back from those, because it was two full long days full of presentations. So
if you ever have a lot to report, you could probably write a memo, and Chris could share that with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you feel like, yeah.
Or it just depends how much is seen as necessary, I guess, or because the most of it is probably beyond the realm of what we need to know, but
Yeah, you'll figure it out over time. It's a balance, too much or too little. And the chair, as Jamie did last year, and I'll do this year. We'll say, okay, let's keep going. Let's move on, and cover the other bases through an email. So, I appreciate this very helpful report. Thank you, Eddie. So I'm just gonna rifle through a few things. John Sitkin, you will be glad to know that I had my last day on the Whatcom County Planning Commission last Thursday. I termed out in that capacity, and I just wanted to mention that to you. And one of the ongoing topics that will be a big focus for the Planning Commission is the comp plan, which as a private citizen, I've been able to provide input to as well on the Planning Commission. And the issue that is hot is, how do we deal with land use and private wells, that PDS gives permits for private wells relatively liberally, and how is that going to be addressed in our county? And so just wanted to mention that the Watershed Management Board, Commissioner Arnett, I was just browsing through some of my emails and noticed that they're looking for topics for your next meeting. So you may consider working with our staff to help identify topics. And if I may kindly make a suggestion, and that would be the thing that I brought up before, is this nexus between land use and water. Mark Bersonius actually specifically talked about that at the county council, the relying on the Watershed Management Board to help answer questions on the nexus of land use and water. And I don't know if the Watershed Management Board wants to handle that ball, but some people are pointing to it as a resource for addressing that. And I don't know what.
Well, that came up quite a bit in the strategic planning process, actually, land use.
Okay, great. I just wanted to bring it up. Eddie already.
On that topic, I would just say there's some in the water resources community that are increasingly feeling that ecology's approaches, tribes' responses, and how enforcement may occur over the next few years largely may be driven by what the county's position is allocation of rural growth versus urbanization growth. The county's going through its population forecast and allocating growth to the cities or to rural areas, and the more that's allocated to rural areas, I think will be poorly received.
Yeah, thank you. Eddie already talked about Senate Bill 5445. So I won't mention that again. We'll talk about that when we talk about legislation. I'll probably bring that up if Eddie doesn't put it on his list. I learned about cybersecurity. The PUD can now discuss, John, in executive session. Apparently, latest recent legislation allows that. I would like to once again make the request. I've made that in previous years that we have an update for the commission on our cybersecurity approaches, recognizing that we should have that in executive session. I think in the past I was told that it's not possible to do so, but I think now it is. So maybe you can address that in an upcoming.
I think Chris and I discussed that after seeing your email, and candidly, I don't recall the discussion about why you couldn't, but we can do this in executive session, and Chris and I discussed putting that on topic in the near future, trying to balance other matters. Yeah,
it's not at all urgent. It just, when I look at the claims, sometimes I see things that it's partially understanding what we spend money on and approve expenses on, and quite a bit of our miscellaneous smaller expenses are related to cybersecurity. It'd be good to understand that in terms of our
NERC compliance is as rigorous as any could be. Chris and Brian can speak more to that. We had some issues of upgrading a number of years ago, 10 years ago, to getting compliance with some of those requirements, but those are often the most strict requirements in terms of cybersecurity, and we've remained in compliance with the FERC requirements.
That's correct.
Of course, I'm gonna mention the reason I'm not there in person, everybody, is because I was a little bit under the weather this weekend and rather take a chance of passing it forward. I've become a lot more cautious. So apologize for not being in person with you all, but I was doing this to protect everybody at the PUD. So I wanted to thank public input. We got an email from.
One more commissioner comment I was going to add. It's commission related. It was just that we need to book on your agenda sometime before the end of March the OPMA and the public records training for the commission, given we have 2 newly elected commissioners. And so I'll be working with Chris to put that on. I see facial expression. Commissioner Tool Dashmani is considered a new commissioner under the education program. So given he was just elected, we'll have to do that before the end of March. So we'll try to book that on your regular agenda for about a half hour, 45 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank some of the public input we've been getting recently. Todd Legacy for his info on nuclear and data centers. I'm sure Commissioner Uri looked at that, and obviously one of the key concerns about in the public power world and the utility world is to make sure that we also get access to that. And I think the Amazon agreement is structured so that public power committee will get plenty of power too, if it so chooses. Andrew Redding sent an email about geothermal and some other utility matters. Again, appreciate the communication we're getting from the public at large. And I just want to let you know that I did finally get an email from Jeff Margolis. And I'm just gonna read this email because he didn't come to public comment. Dear Mr. Dashmani and PUD commissioners, I'm addressing you on behalf of the South Fork Valley Community Association. The SVCA is a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to build community in Eastern Whatcom County. Too often the sector often seems to escape recognition. Our area escapes recognition through geographical, rural, not densely populated residents. So it is as in the PUD assessment for assistance to your area 192, in addition to broadband accessibility is infeasible. And what he's asking for this region of Deming, Whatcom, Mosquito Lake Road, and the Southwood Valley voted for and helped to install 2 of you commissioners with the hope that they would secure accessibility as the private sector has failed to live up to its promise. And we are concerned that our electronic participation in mainstream America will remain diminished. In the past election, Whatcom County Voting District 3, which coordinates some with the project area 192, cast about 6,000 votes. This might not be an exact sync, but our point is that thousands of households are not going to be able to keep up with the progress of other sectors. It's the consensus of the Southwood Valley Association Board that in project area 192 should see, when seen for its development potential, both socially and economically, would be cost effective to serve. Yours truly, Jeff Margolis. And I will forward this to you, Chris. I tried to paraphrase, out of respect for time, and then you can forward it to the commission.
That's fine.
Going on with public input, Eric Hurst sent me, I don't know if you other commissioners also got his latest draft paper on water use. I responded with some questions for clarification in his final version, but it basically talks about the difference between main stem and tributaries, particularly Bertrand and Fish Trap Creek, as compared to the main stem, and what water use in the summer looks like. And for me, it's the thing I immediately jump to is that it creates a clear case for piped water, because that summer load is perhaps best served from the main stem as opposed to the creeks. Eric Hurst and many others, it was a packed room, attended the latest City Club meeting lunch on adjudication. I encourage you all to watch the video after the fact. I had a conflicting meeting, so I wasn't able to see the whole thing. I came late, but I really enjoyed comments by Fred Lickle and Turtle. Could someone remind me of
Victor
his,
Johnson.
what's his name?
Victor Johnson.
Victor Johnson, thank you. Both great comments by both of them are the ones that I saw. I already mentioned I attended a Whatcom Conservation District meeting, and I have been invited by the executive on February 4th. I sent an email to our clerk a little bit late, but I wanted to bring it to your attention for February 4th, next Tuesday, I believe that is, to go to visit a wireless provider in Canada. I'm asking for a per diem for February 4th, as well as my plane ticket travel expenses, which in US dollars should be about $150. I won't be staying there. It'll be a day trip. And the argument here is that there's potential that there's a wireless provider that the county executive has been talking to for some time that might be able to compete with Starlink. So potentially an alternative for Starlink or satellite for phase 2. And I'd like to request the commission's approval to go spend the day with the executive.
So Commissioner, is this a different firm than the one that came down and gave a sales pitch to the entire broadband board last year?
It is affiliated with that.
So the just a couple observations. Number one, we've heard their pitch. What they want is they want us to own all the electronics at the end in order to do the wireless system. And of course, I'm sure they're delighted to provide services on those electronics for a fee. But that's really not our bailiwick, number one. Number two, it's not really what the BEAD application is for. And I think it'd be rejected on that case. Number three, we are not the candidates for that. It is the local wireless groups. These folks ought to be selling their wares to DNG and others who we're going to work with, because the wireless spectrum is owned by DNG. So you can't have a third-party interloper come in unless they're gonna use non-licensed spectrum, which doesn't fit B. You just can't use it. So I'm perplexed. Satpol keeps bringing this back and we've investigated the living daylights out of it and it's not.
It's not a
fit.
good match for B, is your point. Yeah, okay.
It's just not a good fit.
Okay, well, I'll make a decision about it. Yeah, I might go on my own nickel if it makes sense for me. There might be something that the executive has in mind himself, so that he wants to pursue. So he obviously, I'll follow up with him and decide on that. Thank you for that, Chris. I'm not in any way disagreeing with what you're saying.
I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news on that. It's just these guys have been after us for 2 years now and I've been down that road.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure a way out of Starlink. You know? So.
I think there was a wonderful article in the Wall Street Journal about 2 weeks ago about rural broadband. If I can find it, I can dig it out for you, but it was really illuminating. And the bottom line was that once you cross a certain threshold and it's quite low, as a society, maybe we ought to just step back and say low Earth orbit is the answer and be done with it.
Well, I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but I have to go to work after this meeting, so we might want to get her moving.
Yeah, I rifled through my items. If anybody wants further clarification, I can address those at our next meeting. But that's all my report for now. So with that, I think we have gone through most of our agenda, and I think we have now the open session for public comment number 2. Is there anybody in the room or anybody online who would like to speak?
Todd, you have nothing to say?
Well, Todd Legacy again, since you asked. It was interesting during the NC presentation that they brought up incense cedar because Whatcom, Washington, I think it's Forestry or Forestry Farms, they're doing a seedling sale. And I believe the sale starts February 3rd or something like that. You can just Google it, but they're selling seedlings for $1.50 each. And one of the seedlings they're selling is incense cedars. And I looked them up and they're native to California area. And so that they're doing well up here per the NC really drives home some climate change ideas, concerns. So maybe buy some incense cedar seedlings if you have $1.50 laying around because they're pretty cheap. So that's what I would add. Thanks for asking.
You bet.
So just a kind of point of clarification on the timing. The executive session topic is not time critical. So I don't know what your hard
Oh,
stop
no,
is.
I've got a little time. I just want to make a little time for it.
And we're set up to go when you're ready. Mike's got it on a separate Zoom link, so he's gonna start. I'm gonna monitor, just make sure you're on, then I'll bolt.
Do folks need to take a break? Or can we?
It's better to start up and switch over, so.
Yeah, and I've got a.
Yeah, maybe
actually,
5 minutes.
I've got a PDF that's
Because
get it to a tool so he knows what we're talking about.
Okay, so it's 10:13 now. Does that mean 10:15 or 10:20?
10:20.
Okay, it is 10:33. We are back from executive session and we will adjourn this meeting. Oh, I should have said no action was taken. No action was taken.
No action was taken. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah. No action was taken and we're adjourning the meeting. Thanks.